"Sir, this section is reserved for designated family members. Please step back or security will escort you." That's what they told him. He didn't argue, didn't raise his voice. He just stood there in his worn marine dress jacket holding a folded piece of paper, an invitation written by hand. "Dad, I want you in the front row." His son had written that, but they didn't see that. To them, he didn't belong. 6 Navy SEALs, seated silently in the 5th row, did. They knew exactly who he was. And when they stood, everything changed. The sun had just crested the ridge when Linda Monroe pulled into the faculty lot at St. Albans College, tucked into the peaceful hills of Albemarle County, Virginia. The sky was cloudless, the breeze gentle, and the kind of hopeful stillness lingered in the air that only comes with mornings like this. Graduation day. She smoothed the front of her dress before stepping out of the car, a tightly clutched program in her hand. Her son's name was printed halfway down the second column. Dean's List. She'd read those words at least 100 times in the past 2 weeks, each time feeling a pride so strong it had nowhere to go but her chest. The auditorium buzzed. When she arrived, families holding signs and bouquets, camera flashes dancing across the room. An usher waved her toward her seat, 5th row from the front, center left. She liked being able to see the stage clearly. She liked watching the graduates, caps tilted, gowns swaying, nerves and excitement written all over their faces. But more than anything, she liked watching the crowd. That's when she saw him. He didn't come in through the main entrance. He appeared quietly through a side door near the emergency exit. Alone, intentional. He wore an old marine dress jacket, the kind Linda remembered from her father's funeral. Faded seams, a bit too broad in the shoulders. His jeans were frayed, boots worn, hands clasped behind his back. And though the crowd buzzed with motion, laughter, and chatter, he stood utterly still, like a statue no one had asked for, yet no one could look away from. Linda tilted her head. He didn't seem confused. He seemed patient, watchful, like he was waiting for something. Then he moved, slowly, deliberately, toward the roped-off front rows marked by silver placards and name tags. Guest of honor. He stepped toward a seat near the aisle. That's when the girl in the headset appeared. Young, clipboard clutched to her chest. "Sir," she said, blocking his path. "This section is for designated family only." He nodded, calm. "My son's graduating today. I should be on the list." She didn't check. Didn't even look. Just pointed toward the back. "You'll need to stand clear, please, or security will escort you." He didn't flinch, didn't argue, just took one quiet step back. Then another. 2 security guards drifted closer, looming just behind her. Most of the crowd didn't notice. They were too busy adjusting ties and angling cameras. But Linda noticed, and so did a small group of men just a few seats to her right, in row 5. Their eyes hadn't left him since he walked in. The old Marine took a position by the wall just beneath the glowing red exit sign, hands behind his back, chin lifted, eyes fixed on the stage. Moments later, the ceremony began. A booming voice echoed from the speakers, welcoming students, families, and honored guests. The audience applauded, and the cameras clicked. The dean made a joke about tuition. The crowd laughed, loud and easy. But Linda didn't. She was still watching the man at the back. The girl with the headset passed by him again, this time flanked by another staffer. "He's still standing there," she whispered. "I don't think he's even invited." "I'll have security keep an eye on him," the other replied, barely glancing his way. Linda felt her chest tighten, not with fear, not even anger. It was something else, something heavier, a kind of secondhand shame that wasn't hers to carry, but wrapped around her anyway. Because that man didn't look like trouble. He looked like someone who had already seen more than his share of it. Then came the student speaker, a confident, young man in a tailored suit. Impeccable posture, perfect smile. The program listed him as the dean's son. He thanked faculty, parents, friends. He hit all the right notes, all the expected pauses. Then he added one more. "And a special thanks," he said with a smirk, "to the presentable family sitting right here in the front, reminding us what real college values look like." Polite laughter rippled across the room. Controlled, well-rehearsed. But Linda didn't laugh. Neither did the man at the back. Neither did the 3 men in row 5. They exchanged glances, Tight. Quiet. One of them, tall with a close-cropped haircut beneath a ball cap, leaned forward slightly. That was for him, he muttered. The others nodded. Slow. Certain. Linda looked toward the stage, then back at the man by the wall. He hadn't moved, still standing, still waiting, still holding something no one else could see, but everyone should have felt. And in that moment, Linda Monroe knew two things without a shred of doubt. That man didn't come here to make a scene, and someone had made a mistake, a big one. She didn't know his name, didn't know what uniform he wore, or how many times he'd walked into the fire so others wouldn't have to. But she knew this. He didn't belong at the back of the room. Not today, not ever, and if no one else was going to see it, maybe it had to be her. The ceremony moved forward. Names were called. Flashbulbs popped. Applause rolled like waves. But Linda couldn't take her eyes off the man in the shadows. The one no one else seemed to see. A few rows behind her, the three men still watched him too. Their posture was different now, more alert, more still. They weren't just witnessing, they were waiting. Then the ushers moved again. This time one of them held a clipboard. A security guard followed close behind. Linda leaned forward, breath tight in her throat. The man didn't resist, didn't raise his voice. As one of the guards stepped up and said something, too quiet for Linda to hear, he turned just slightly, enough for her to catch the words that followed. "I'm not causing trouble," he said. "My son asked me to be here. I'm not moving until I see him walk that stage." The guard squared his shoulders, trying to assert control. "Sir, I need you to come with me." Linda glanced around. No one else seemed to notice what was happening. The families in the front rows were too busy angling for the perfect shot of their graduate, clapping, waving, laughing, blissfully unaware of the quiet removal unfolding just feet away, except for the three men in row 5, and Linda. She turned slightly to the woman beside her, a school administrator, judging by the badge pinned neatly to her blouse. "Do you know who that man is?" Linda asked, voice low. The woman barely looked up from her program. "Probably someone who wandered into the wrong section," she replied with a shrug. "These ceremonies always bring in extras." Extras. The word struck harder than Linda expected, as if this man, this figure of silent strength and worn dignity, was just clutter, an afterthought. She looked back, and for the first time she really saw him, the lines in his face, the tight set of his jaw. The way his left shoulder dipped just slightly, like an old injury still whispered of battles long past. And the jacket, marine blue, brass buttons dulled by time, sleeves frayed at the cuffs. It wasn't for show. It was the best thing he had. Because today mattered. She didn't know how long he'd been standing there, but she knew this. He hadn't come for attention. He'd come for his son. The second guard moved in, placing a hand gently on the man's elbow, a quiet but firm nudge toward the exit. Then Linda heard it, faint but unmistakable. The crinkle of paper. The man reached into the inner pocket of his jacket and pulled out a small, worn card. Its corners were bent, edges soft, like it had been folded and unfolded too many times to count. He held it out, not to the guards, but in front of him. Not as a challenge, as a reason. "My son sent this," he said softly. "Handwritten. Blue, ink, faded but clear." Linda caught a glimpse. "Dad, I want you in the front row. It didn't matter. No guest pass, no seat," the usher repeated, her voice harder now. "Please, sir." The man exhaled slowly and nodded. No protest, no scene, just a quiet, obedient step back. Linda felt something rise in her throat. Anger, yes, but something deeper. Shame. Not hers. His. The kind of shame that doesn't come from doing something wrong, but from being treated like you don't matter when you do. Her pulse quickened. She opened her mouth to say something, but she didn't have to. A single chair scraped back. Then another. then 4 more. Row 5. 6 men stood up at once. They didn't speak, didn't shout, didn't call attention to themselves. But in the ripple of that movement, Linda felt the whole room shift. The man nearest the aisle, tall, broad-shouldered, sharp-eyed beneath a civilian ball cap, stepped into the aisle. And then he walked, past the rows, past the chatter, toward the back, toward the old Marine, toward the man being escorted out of his own son's graduation. He reached into his jacket and pulled something from his pocket. Linda squinted. A badge? Not police, not rank. It caught the overhead lights and gleamed, gold edged with silver wings. And then she saw it. The Trident, United States Navy SEAL. Another man joined him. Then another. Now all 6 stood beside the old Marine, not guarding him, not surrounding him, backing him. The first man, the tall one, turned to the security guard, and in a voice low but resonant, clear enough to silence even the whispers, he said, "You're about to make a mistake. A big one." "That man doesn't leave this room," the SEAL said, his voice firm, unwavering. "He led us through hell. He stays right here." Gasps rippled through the rows. Some heads turned. Others only now noticed what was unfolding. Most still didn't understand. But Linda did. She rose slowly from her seat, her eyes fixed on the old Marine, his name still unknown, but not his worth. Because no one gets a SEAL to stand for them by accident, and no one gets 6. The security guards froze. Eyes, darting between the badges, the men, and the growing crowd now tuned in. The usher who had turned him away took a step back, her confidence draining, her eyes wide with realization. But the old Marine didn't gloat, didn't lift his head in triumph. He simply lowered his gaze to the floor. Because this moment, it wasn't about vindication. It was about something else, something sacred. He never demanded a seat, only wanted to see his son walk that stage. A seat that never came. Linda turned to the woman beside her again, no longer asking, just knowing. She said quietly, "That man's name will mean something before this day is done." And then she stepped aside, clearing a path, because whatever happened next, the program no longer mattered. The speeches no longer mattered. Something far more important had just walked in from the back of the room, and it had been standing there all along. The auditorium held its breath. For a long, suspended moment. The only sound was the hum of the overhead lights, and the soft rustle of programs being tucked, forgotten, beneath seats. The 6 SEALs stood shoulder to shoulder. No uniforms, no salutes, but their presence said everything. The badges in their hands caught the light, small, gleaming, unmistakable. The Navy SEAL Trident. Linda Monroe didn't move. Her heart thundered in her chest, but her body remained still. Everyone around her had turned now. Voices stilled, phones lowered. The laughter from earlier dissolved like it never belonged, and the old Marine, he just stood, still, silent. The invitation still folded in his weathered hand. His jaw clenched, not in anger, but in quiet restraint. The tall SEAL stepped forward, again. When he spoke, his voice didn't rise, but it filled the room. "You can't remove him," he said. "You won't." He paused, then looked slowly toward the crowd. "This man led us through fire, through dirt, through blood. When the world collapsed behind us, he stood up front. He turned back to the guards. He doesn't leave this room. No applause, no cheers, just a deep and undeniable shift. It wasn't loud. It was quieter than reverence. Like the entire room had just woken up from a dream it wasn't proud of. Like shame had drawn back its curtain. And everyone finally saw what was real. Then, another voice rose. From the left side of the auditorium. It was older. Not loud. Not commanding. But clear. Unmistakable. A man stood, chest draped in military medals that shimmered beneath a tailored gray jacket. Heads turned. Gasps followed. Linda did too. She recognized the uniform. Army, high rank, a colonel, I know that, man, the colonel said, voice firm, carrying across the auditorium. His name is Master Sergeant Raymond Cole, 3rd Reconnaissance Battalion, United States Marine Corps, retired. He paused, took a breath thick with memory. In 2006, during Operation Firewatch in Kandahar, I watched that man run back into a burning compound to drag out 5 Marines under active fire. The colonel's voice didn't waver. He didn't ask for backup. He didn't wait for orders. He just went. Silence hit harder than before. He looked down for a moment, then back up. He was the only one who came back standing, the colonel said, quieter now. Because he carried the rest of us on his back. A single cough broke the hush. Somewhere, someone dropped their program, but still, no one spoke. Linda looked again at the man beside the exit, Raymond Cole, still standing, still silent, still not asking for anything. Then, movement. From the side of the stage, a shuffle, a shift. A young man stepped forward from behind, the graduate's cap and gown crisp, eyes scanning the crowd. His steps were fast, purposeful. His hands trembled slightly as he reached for the microphone. Linda knew before he said a word. This was his son, Lucas Cole. He didn't clear his throat, didn't wait for permission. He just leaned in, voice low but unwavering. That's my dad. Every head turned. Lucas scanned the crowd, his voice tight but steady. He didn't want attention. He never has. Every morning before school, for as long as I can remember, he told me the same thing. He stopped, swallowed. Then, stand tall. Keep going. Be someone you'd be proud to look in the eye. He looked toward the back of the auditorium. I'm proud today, Lucas said, his voice cracking slightly. But not because of this degree. Not because of this stage. He stepped away from the podium. I'm proud because of him. The silence that followed was sacred. Not church quiet. Not staged or ceremonial. But deep. True. Lucas walked down the steps, past the rows of stunned graduates through a still sea of onlookers. He didn't hesitate. He stopped in front of his father, and in a single, practiced motion, he raised his hand in salute. Raymond didn't return it. He stepped forward and pulled his son into his arms. Their embrace wasn't dramatic, wasn't staged. It was real. And that's why it hit harder than anything else that day. The 6 SEALs stood straighter. Then, as one, they saluted. No ceremony, no spotlight, just respect. Linda blinked quickly, trying to clear her eyes. She couldn't remember the last time she'd seen a room full of people forget themselves this completely. People who'd laughed a few minutes ago now stood frozen, reverent. No phones, no chatter, no smiles. And in that stillness, something holy happened. Not religious, but sacred. Raymond placed a hand gently on Lucas's shoulder, leaned in, and whispered something only his son could hear. Lucas smiled faintly, nodded, then turned to face the crowd, with his father at his side. The usher who'd dismissed him earlier stared down at her clipboard like it had betrayed her. One of the security guards quietly stepped away, vanishing down a side hall. No one tried to stop them now. No one dared. Linda Monroe stood quietly as Lucas took his father's hand and led him forward, toward the front, toward the rows that once wouldn't have him, and for the first time that morning every single person got out of the way. Not because they were told, but because it was right. Raymond Cole didn't say a word as he walked beside his son. He didn't have to. The silence of the auditorium said enough. At first it held, thick and unmoving, the kind of stillness that only follows when something sacred has passed through a room. Then a sound, soft, tentative, a single pair of hands clapping, slow, steady, then another, and another, like rain starting with one drop, then swelling into a flood. Within moments, the entire auditorium was on its feet. No cheers, no whoops, just applause. Pure, grounded. reverent. Linda Monroe stood too. Her hands came together, not just in recognition, but in apology. Because the man they tried to push aside had become the man no one could look away from. The usher who had dismissed him stood frozen, staring at the floor. Her clipboard trembled in her grip. As Raymond passed, she stepped aside, not out of protocol but out of shame. She didn't speak, didn't look up, just folded into silence. Raymond's walk to the front wasn't rushed. His boots struck the floor with the same cadence they must have held in the field. Measured, deliberate, unshaken, Lucas never left his side. When they reached the roped-off section, the very line he'd been denied entry through earlier, no one stood in his way. The same usher who'd turned him away now moved without a word. There was no resistance, just space. Space that hadn't been given, but had now been earned. Raymond didn't gloat, didn't nod in triumph. He simply sat. Second row, center left. Lucas beside him and behind them, still standing. Those 6 SEALs remained. They didn't return to their seats, they didn't need to. Their place was behind him, not in front, not beside. Behind. Where they'd always been. The ceremony resumed, but the tone had shifted, irrevocably. When the dean returned to the podium, he didn't speak right away. He looked at the group, at Raymond, and paused, visibly unsettled, visibly aware. His voice, when it finally came, was quieter, smaller. "We are honored today," he said, clearing his throat, "to welcome guests of great distinction. Some we failed to recognize soon enough." There was a pause, then a few claps, then more, and the room once again filled with sound, but this time it wasn't for the dean, not for the faculty, not even for the graduates. It was for a man who came with nothing but a folded card in his coat, and the kind of dignity the world forgets how to see. Raymond didn't smile. He didn't soak in the moment. He simply unfolded the invitation, one last time. Read the words his son had written. "Dad, I want you in the front row." Then tucked it back into his pocket, close to his chest, because that's what he'd come for. Not the spotlight. Just that seat. After the ceremony, as the crowd slowly filtered out, Linda stayed in her chair. She didn't want to leave yet she wanted to see what happened after the applause, after the lights dimmed, after the decorations came down, and that's when she saw it. Something she'd never forget. One by one, students passed by Raymond's seat. Some shook his hand, some paused, laid a gentle hand on his shoulder, then walked on. No words, just presence. One young woman, a graduate tear-streaked, stopped in front of him, saluted, whispered, "Thank you for carrying them." Raymond nodded softly. Didn't speak. Linda's throat tightened, because she understood. They all did now. This wasn't just a graduation, it had become a reckoning. A moment when the world remembered what honor looked like, and who it owed it to. There was no announcement, no camera crew, no prepared statement, just gratitude, in its rawest, realest form. Then one of the SEALs, the youngest looking of the 6, stepped forward. He placed something small in Raymond's hand. A coin. Challenge coin. Linda recognized it. She'd seen one once, at a funeral. They weren't given lightly. Raymond turned it over in his palm. On one side, the emblem of their SEAL team. On the other, 5 engraved words. "The quiet ones lead the loudest wars." Raymond closed his hand around the coin. He didn't cry. But Linda swore. Just for a second. His shoulders eased, as if something heavy had been lifted. Not taken. Just shared. And that mattered. That meant everything. Later, as the room emptied and the janitorial staff moved quietly through the rows, Linda finally stood. She glanced one last time toward the man who had changed the course of an entire morning without raising his voice. He hadn't come for applause. He hadn't come to prove a point. He came because his son asked him to. Because somewhere in a world that forgets too quickly, One boy remembered. Linda turned toward the exit, her heels clicking softly on the tile. At the door, she paused, her hand resting lightly on the handle. Then she looked back. One final time. At the 6 men, still standing guard. At the boy who gave up his moment for his father. At the man who had stood quietly at the back of the room until the whole room stood for him. And she said, not aloud, but clear enough in her heart. He didn't come to demand anything. He came for a seat. But by the time he left, the whole room stood for him. Not because he asked for it, but because they owed it. In our darkest moments, kindness still finds a way, often in the quietest places. Not everyone who helps wants recognition. Some just need to know that today someone isn't going hungry, and sometimes that alone is enough to change a life. You may forget the story, but if no one retells it, history stays silent forever. Subscribe to The Silent Wound, where justice is honored, where kindness is remembered, where no act of quiet heroism is ever lost.